The rushing waters of Silver Creek drowned out Lily Jenkins' desperate cries as she raced along the muddy bank, her heart pounding against her ribs like a frightened bird. Her 5-year-old son, Caleb, had disappeared from sight only moments ago, and the spring rains had turned the usually gentle stream into a roaring monster that clawed at everything in its path. Caleb, Caleb. Lily's voice broke as she stumbled through the underbrush, her skirts heavy with mud and water. Oregon Territory in 1857 was unforgiving to a young widow, and it seemed now that the land itself was determined to take the only thing she had left in this world. The creek bent sharply around a collection of boulders, and Lily lost her footing as she rounded the corner, falling hard to her knees. Through tear-blurred vision, she saw a flash of her son's blue shirt as the current pulled him downstream, his small arms flailing weakly against the torrent. "Help, somebody help," she screamed, knowing it was futile. Their homestead was too far from Oregon City for anyone to hear, and she couldn't swim well enough to brave the churning waters. But then, like an apparition from her most desperate prayers, a horse and rider thundered past her. The man didn't hesitate. He drove his chestnut mare straight into the creek, powerful arms guiding the animal as they cut diagonally across the current. Lily watched, frozen in terror and hope, as the stranger reached out and snatched Caleb from the water in one fluid motion, pulling the boy's limp form against his chest. The horse fought against the current, its muscles straining visibly as it carried its double burden back toward the bank where Lily waited. The man dismounted in the shallows, carrying Caleb in his arms. Water streamed from his wide-brimmed hat and down the weathered lines of his face as he knelt beside her, gently laying the boy on the ground. "He's not breathing," Lily sobbed, reaching for her son. "Stand back, madam," the stranger commanded, his voice deep but gentle. He turned Caleb onto his side and firmly patted the boy's back. Once, twice, and then Caleb convulsed, water spewing from his mouth as he began to cough violently. "Mama," Caleb whispered when he could finally speak, his voice raspy. Lily gathered her son into her arms, tears of relief streaming down her face as she rocked him back and forth. Only then did she look up at the man who had saved her world. He stood tall despite his soaked clothing, water dripping from his dark beard and the edges of his worn leather vest. His eyes, a startling shade of blue against his sun-browned skin, regarded her with quiet concern. "Thank you," she whispered, the words wholly inadequate. "I don't know how I can ever repay you." The man touched the brim of his hat. "No need for payment, madam. Name's Brock Adams." "Just glad I was passing by." Lily clutched Caleb tighter. "I'm Lily Jenkins. This is my son Caleb. Our place is just up the hill." She hesitated, suddenly aware of how alone they were out here, but something in the cowboy's steady gaze reassured her. "You should come dry off by our fire." "It's the least I can offer." Brock Adams looked toward the darkening sky where storm clouds were gathering. "Much obliged, Mrs. Jenkins. That'd be welcome." As they made their way up the hillside, Lily couldn't help but glance at the stranger who had appeared like salvation itself. She didn't know it then, but this man who had pulled her son from the swirling waters would soon become the foundation her fragile world had been missing. Lily's small cabin came into view as they crested the hill. It wasn't much a one-room structure with a lean-to addition that served as her bedroom, leaving the main space for Caleb and what little furniture they owned. But she'd worked hard to make it home after her husband, Thomas, died of fever 2 winters ago. "It's not much," she said apologetically as Brock helped her carry Caleb through the doorway. The boy had fallen into an exhausted sleep in his mother's arms, his breathing still ragged but steady. "It's sturdy work," Brock replied, his eyes taking in the neat interior. A small fire smoldered in the stone hearth, and Lily moved to stoke it, laying Caleb on the narrow bed in the corner. "Let me," Brock offered, moving to the hearth. His large hands worked deftly with the kindling, and soon the fire was crackling warmly. "You tend to your boy." Lily nodded gratefully, removing Caleb's wet clothes and wrapping him in a woolen blanket. Her own dress clung uncomfortably to her skin, but she ignored it, focused entirely on her son. "He should be watched through the night," Brock said, hanging his dripping hat on a peg by the door. "Sometimes water lingers in the lungs." Lily looked up, surprised. "You know about such things?" A shadow passed over Brock's face. "Lost my little brother to drowning when I was 16, learned afterward what might have saved him." The simple admission revealed more about the man than perhaps he intended, and Lily felt a twist of sympathy. "I'm sorry." Brock nodded once, accepting her condolence without further comment. "Storm's coming in hard. If you don't mind, I'll see to my horse and then check your roof." Spring rains like this find every weak spot. Before Lily could protest, he was out the door. Through the window, she watched as he led his mare to the small lean-to shed that served as her stable. The animal nudged Brock's shoulder affectionately as he removed the saddle, and Lily found herself studying the gentle way the large man handled the horse, speaking words she couldn't hear, but could somehow feel in the way his lips moved, soft and reassuring. When he returned, his hair was slicked back from the increasing rain, and without asking, he took up the small axe that leaned against the woodpile and began splitting logs for the fire. "Mr. Adams," Lily called from the doorway, "please come in out of the rain. You've done more than enough." He looked up, rain streaming down his face. "Almost finished, madam. You'll need dry wood come morning." Lily watched him work, his powerful shoulders bunching beneath his wet shirt as he swung the axe with practiced efficiency. There was something mesmerizing about his movements, economical yet graceful, like a man who knew precisely how much force was needed and never wasted an ounce more. When he finally came inside, his arms loaded with split wood, Lily had a pot of coffee brewing and had changed into her spare dress, a simple blue cotton that had faded after years of washing. "Here," she said, handing him a bundle of cloth. "These were my husband's. They might be a bit short in the arms, but they're dry." Their fingers brushed as he accepted the clothes, and Lily felt a strange flutter in her chest, something she hadn't experienced since before Thomas fell ill. She turned away quickly, busying herself with the coffee. "You can change behind that curtain," she said, gesturing to the rough homespun fabric that separated her sleeping area from the main room. When Brock emerged, Lily had to suppress a smile. Thomas had been a slight man, and his clothes strained across Brock's broad shoulders and chest. The trousers ended well above his ankles, revealing woolen socks. "I appreciate it, madam," he said, seeming completely at ease despite his mismatched appearance. "How's the boy?" Lily glanced at Caleb, who slept peacefully now, his color much improved. "Better, thanks to you." She poured coffee into 2 tin cups and handed one to Brock. "May I ask what brings you to these parts, Mr. Adams? We don't see many travelers this time of year." Brock took the cup, his large hands nearly engulfing it. "I've been working cattle drives mostly, but I'm looking to settle somewhere. Heard there was land available in the Oregon Territory." He took a sip of coffee, appreciation flickering in his eyes. "Good coffee." "My husband always said coffee should be strong enough to stand a spoon in," Lily said with a small smile. "As for land, there's plenty still unclaimed, though the best parcels near water are taken." "Don't need the best land," Brock replied. "Just enough for a small herd and a decent cabin." His eyes moved around the room again, taking in the details he'd missed before: the carefully mended curtains, the single shelf of books, the handmade quilt on Caleb's bed. "You manage this place alone?" Lily stiffened slightly. She'd grown used to the veiled propositions from men in Oregon City who thought a widow with a child must be desperate for any offer. But Brock's question held no hidden meaning she could detect, just honest curiosity. "Yes," she answered. "Since Thomas, my husband, passed 2 years ago." "That's no easy task," Brock said, genuine respect in his voice. "We get by." Lily glanced at the window where rain now lashed against the glass. "You're welcome to sleep by the fire tonight, Mr. Adams. That storm isn't letting up anytime soon." Brock followed her gaze to the window. "If you're certain it's no trouble." "You saved my son's life today," Lily said softly. "A dry place to sleep is the least I can offer." Later, as Lily lay in her small bed behind the curtain, she listened to the steady breathing of Caleb beside her and the occasional shifting of Brock as he slept near the hearth. The rain drummed against the roof, but true to his word, the cowboy had found and patched a small leak before settling down for the night. For the first time in months, Lily felt something like peace wash over her. Perhaps it was simply the relief of Caleb's safety, or perhaps it was the comforting presence of another adult in their isolated home. Whatever the reason, she drifted to sleep without the usual weight of worry pressing down on her chest, unaware that fate had just dealt her a hand that would change everything. Morning arrived with surprising brightness, the storm having blown itself out sometime in the night. Lily woke to the smell of coffee and the soft murmur of voices. For a moment, she was disoriented. No one should be in her cabin except Caleb and herself. Then the events of the previous day rushed back, and she quickly rose, running her fingers through her long brown hair before stepping around the curtain. The sight that greeted her stopped her in her tracks. Brock sat at her small table, his large frame making the wooden chair look child-sized. Across from him sat Caleb, giggling as the man created some sort of game with biscuits that Lily recognized as her own handiwork. "Good morning," Brock said, rising as soon as he noticed her. "Hope you don't mind. The boy was hungry when he woke and you were sleeping so peaceful-like." "Mama," Caleb exclaimed, his voice stronger than Lily had expected after his ordeal. "Mr. Brock makes the biscuits talk to each other." "I see that," Lily said, smiling despite her surprise. "How are you feeling, sweetheart?" "My chest hurts a little," Caleb admitted, "but Mr. Brock said that's 'cause the creek tried to steal my breath and my body's mad about it." Lily raised an eyebrow at Brock, who shrugged sheepishly. "Seemed easier than explaining water in the lungs," he said. Lily moved to feel Caleb's forehead, relieved to find no fever. "Well, Mr. Brock is right about that. You need to take it easy today." "But I promised to show him our chickens," Caleb protested. "You have chickens?" Brock asked, seeming genuinely interested. 6 hens and a rooster," Lily confirmed, pouring herself a cup of the coffee he'd made. It was stronger than she usually brewed it, but after the previous day's events, she welcomed the jolt. "They're not much, but they give us eggs to eat and sell in town." "I could take a look at your coop," Brock offered. "Make sure it's secure from predators." Lily was about to decline. She'd managed just fine on her own until now, but Caleb's eager face made her reconsider. "That would be kind of you, Mr. Adams." "Just Brock, please," he said. "Mr. Adams was my father, and he wasn't someone I care to be reminded of." There was a story there, Lily thought, but now wasn't the time to ask. "Brock then, and I'm Lily." The morning passed in a strange domestic rhythm that felt both foreign and familiar to Lily. Brock reinforced the chicken coop with scrap which she hadn't known what to do with, fixed a loose board on the porch steps, and split enough firewood to last her a week. Caleb trailed after him like a devoted puppy, asking endless questions that Brock answered with patient good humor. When midday approached, Lily called them in for a simple meal of beans, bacon, and the last of the biscuits. As they ate, she found herself studying Brock's hands, large and calloused, but surprisingly gentle in their movements. They were the hands of a man who understood both strength and restraint, and Lily found herself wondering what those hands would feel like against her skin. The thought startled her so much that she nearly dropped her fork. It had been so long since she'd thought of any man that way, and this stranger kind as he was still just passing through her life. "I should be on my way after this," Brock said, as if reading her thoughts. "Daylight's burning, and I need to make it to Oregon City before nightfall." "Oh," Caleb's face fell dramatically. "Can't you stay one more night? You haven't seen my fort yet, Caleb," Lily admonished gently. "Mr. Ad Brock has his own business to attend to. We've taken enough of his time." Brock smiled at the boy. "Your mama's right. But maybe I could stop by on my way back through. See this fort of yours then?" Caleb brightened immediately. "Promise?" Something flickered in Brock's eyes, uncertainty perhaps, but he nodded. "If your ma doesn't mind, I promise." Lily found herself nodding before she could consider the wisdom of it. "We'd be glad to have you." An hour later, Brock was mounted on his mare, his clothes from the previous day mostly dried and his hat firmly in place. He looked down at Lily and Caleb, who stood on the porch to see him off. "Thank you for your hospitality, Lily," he said, her name sounding different in his deep voice, like something precious. "It was nothing compared to what you did for us," she replied. "Be safe on the trail." "Goodbye, Mr. Brock," Caleb called, waving enthusiastically. "Don't forget about my fort." Brock touched his hat in a small salute. "Couldn't forget if I tried, partner." His eyes met Lily's one last time, and something unspoken passed between them before he turned his horse and rode away. Lily watched until he disappeared over the hill, wondering if she would ever see him again and surprised by how much she hoped she would. 3 days passed, each one stretching longer than the last. Lily told herself she wasn't waiting for anything or anyone. Her life had returned to its normal routine of chores. tending to Caleb, and working the small garden that provided most of their food. But she couldn't deny the way her heart leapt whenever she heard hoofbeats on the road, only to sink when it turned out to be a passing neighbor or a figment of her imagination. Caleb spoke of nothing but Mr. Brock and the promised visit to see his fort, a ramshackle construction of fallen branches and old blankets in a small clearing behind the cabin. Lily gently tried to prepare him for disappointment, explaining that sometimes grown-ups made promises they couldn't keep, especially traveling men like Brock Adams. "He'll come back," Caleb insisted with the unshakable faith of childhood. He promised. On the fourth day, Lily was hanging laundry when she saw a rider approaching from the direction of Oregon City. Even at a distance, she recognized the set of his shoulders and the chestnut mare beneath him. Her hands faltered on the wet sheet she was pinning to the line, and she took a deep breath to calm the sudden flutter in her chest. "Caleb," she called toward the cabin, "we have a visitor." Her son burst from the doorway, his eyes widening when he spotted the approaching rider. "Mr. Brock." He shouted, taking off down the path at a run despite Lily's call for him to wait. Brock reined in his horse as Caleb reached him, dismounting in one fluid motion and crouching to the boy's level. Lily couldn't hear what was said, but Caleb's excited bouncing and Brock's easy smile told her enough. After a moment, Brock straightened and led his horse the rest of the way to the cabin, Caleb practically dancing alongside him. "Hope we're not intruding," Brock said as they reached the laundry line where Lily waited. "Not at all," she replied, acutely aware of the wisps of hair that had escaped her bun and the damp spots on her apron. "Caleb's been counting the minutes. Wasn't sure I'd make it back this way," Brock admitted, "but I found what I was looking for in Oregon City quicker than expected." "And what was that?" Lily asked, curious despite herself. "Land," Brock replied, a note of satisfaction in his voice. 40 acres with good water and timber about 3 miles east of here." Lily stared at him, processing the implications. "You're staying in the area." "Appears so," he said, a smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "If that's all right with the neighbors." "Can I show him my fort now, Mama?" Caleb interrupted, tugging at Brock's sleeve. Lily nodded, still trying to absorb the news. "Go ahead. I'll finish hanging these clothes and put on some coffee." As Caleb dragged Brock away toward his prized creation, Lily found herself pinning the remaining laundry with unusual care, her mind racing. Brock Adams wasn't just passing through after all. He would be a neighbor close enough to visit regularly, far enough that she needn't feel crowded by his presence. The thought brought both comfort and anxiety. Since Thomas died, Lily had grown accustomed to her independence, to making decisions without having to consider a man's opinion. But she couldn't deny the pull she felt toward Brock, or the way Caleb had instantly bonded with him. By the time they returned from inspecting the fort, which Brock had apparently declared the finest construction west of the Mississippi, Lily had composed herself and prepared coffee, and the last of her apple preserves with bread. "Your boy has quite an imagination," Brock said as they sat at the table. "Told me all about how that fort has fought off bears and wolves and even a band of pirates." "Pirates?" Lily laughed. "That's a new one. River pirates," Caleb corrected seriously. "They come up from the Columbia to steal treasures." "Of course," Brock nodded solemnly, though his eyes twinkled when they met Lily's. "Can't be too careful with river pirates about." The easy way he played along with Caleb's fantasies touched something in Lily's heart. Thomas had been a good man and a decent father, but he'd had little patience for childish games, always focusing on the practical matters of survival in the territory. "So tell me about this land you've purchased," Lily said, eager to learn more about Brock's plans. "It's good grazing land, mostly." Small creek running through it, nothing like the one that nearly took Caleb, just a gentle stream. There's a clearing that would be perfect for a cabin. He paused, seeming almost shy for the first time since she'd met him. "I was hoping you might ride out with me sometime to see it." "Both of you, I mean?" "I'd like that," Lily replied before she could second-guess herself. "Perhaps Sunday after church." Brock's expression shifted slightly. "I don't attend church much, but I'd be happy to meet you after. You don't believe in God, Mr. Brock?" Caleb asked, his young face serious. Brock considered the question with the same respect he'd shown for the boys' fort. "I believe in something, Caleb, just not sure it's the same God they preach about in church buildings." Lily expected to feel disapproval. She'd been raised in a devout Baptist family back in Missouri, but instead she found herself appreciating his honesty. "The service ends at 11, she said. "We could meet you here afterward." "I'll bring lunch," Brock offered. "Least I can do for taking up your Sunday." The next few days passed in a blur of anticipation for Lily. She found herself paying extra attention to her appearance on Sunday morning, pinning her hair more carefully than usual, and choosing her best dress, a dark green cotton that Thomas had always said brought out the flecks of gold in her brown eyes. Caleb noticed her efforts as they walked to the small church in Oregon City. "You look pretty, Mama. Is it for Mr. Brock?" Lily felt her cheeks warm. "It's Sunday, Caleb. We dress our best for the Lord." Caleb seemed unconvinced but didn't press the issue. Throughout the service, Lily found her mind wandering from the Reverend's sermon about the prodigal son to thoughts of the afternoon ahead. What would Brock's land look like? Why had he really come back to see them? And why did the thought of spending more time with him fill her with both excitement and trepidation? When they returned home, Brock was already waiting, his mare hitched to a small wagon that hadn't been there during his previous visits. He'd clearly made an effort with his appearance as well. His dark hair was neatly combed, his beard trimmed, and he wore a clean blue shirt that emphasized the breadth of his shoulders. "Right on time," he said, standing as they approached. "Service go well." Reverend Thompson talked a long time about a son who ran away and ate with pigs, Caleb reported. Brock chuckled. "The prodigal son. Been on the receiving end of that sermon a time or two myself." "Were you a prodigal son, Mr. Brock?" Caleb asked as he climbed eagerly into the wagon. Something darkened in Brock's eyes, but he answered lightly. "More like a son who never had the chance to return home, Caleb." Before Lily could inquire further, Brock was helping her up onto the wagon seat, his hand strong and steady around hers. The simple contact sent warmth spiraling through her arm and into her chest, and she was grateful for the distraction of arranging her skirts on the seat. The journey to Brock's land took less than an hour, much of it spent listening to Caleb's excited chatter about everything from squirrels to cloud shapes. Brock answered each observation with genuine interest, occasionally sharing facts about the local wildlife or pointing out landmarks along the way. "Just over this rise," he said finally, guiding the horses up a gentle slope. "Best view of the property is from the top." As the wagon crested the hill, Lily drew in a breath of appreciation. Before them stretched a peaceful valley, bordered on one side by a line of pines and on the other by rolling meadows. A silver ribbon of creek wound through the center, catching the midday sun, and wildflowers dotted the grass in splashes of color. "It's beautiful," Lily said softly. "That's where my cabin will go," Brock pointed to a flat area near a stand of oaks. "Good shelter from winter winds, but catches the morning sun." "Where will the cows live?" Caleb asked, bouncing with excitement. "All around," Brock replied, gesturing to the meadow. "I'm thinking about 30 head to start, enough to build a good herd over time." He guided the wagon down the hill and to the proposed cabin site where he'd already begun preparations. A stack of felled logs lay neatly arranged, and the ground had been cleared and leveled. "You've been busy," Lily observed as they climbed down from the wagon. "Wanted to get started before winter," Brock explained. "Neighbors to the East Harrington family let me use their barn while I build. Good folks." Lily knew the Harringtons slightly, a middle-aged couple with grown children who'd been among the first settlers in the area. If they had welcomed Brock, that spoke well of his character. "Now," Brock said, reaching into the back of the wagon, "I promised lunch." The meal he had prepared surprised Lily. Not just bread and cheese as she'd expected, but fried chicken, potato salad, and even an apple pie that he admitted sheepishly had been purchased from Mrs. Harrington. "This is a feast," Lily said as they spread a blanket beneath one of the oak trees. "Wanted to make a good impression," Brock replied, the honesty in his voice catching her off guard. "Don't often get the chance to share a meal with company I enjoy." The simple statement warmed Lily more than the bright spring sunshine. They ate amid comfortable conversation, with Caleb periodically jumping up to explore the immediate surroundings under Brock's watchful eye. "You're good with him," Lily observed after Brock had patiently explained why ants marched in lines to gather food. "He's a good boy," Brock replied. "Smart." Reminds me a bit of myself at that age, always curious about everything. And did you get answers to your questions? Lily asked, curious about the man's past. Brock's expression grew distant. Not often. My father wasn't one for explaining things. Believed children should be seen and not heard. He seemed to catch himself, shaking off the memory. Your husband, was he good to the boy? Thomas was. Preoccupied, Lily said carefully. He was a good man in his way, but the territory was hard on him. He spent most of his time working, trying to make our farm profitable. She paused, memories flooding back. He loved Caleb, I believe, but he wasn't demonstrative by nature. Brock nodded, seeming to understand the complexities she wasn't expressing. It's not easy out here for anyone. Takes a special kind of strength to raise a child in these conditions. Sometimes I wonder if I'm doing it right, Lily admitted, surprised at her own candor. If I'm enough for him? From what I can see, Brock said, his blue eyes intent on hers, you're doing just fine. He's happy, healthy, and kind. That says everything about the mother raising him. Lily felt tears prick unexpectedly at the corners of her eyes and looked away, focusing on Caleb as he chased a butterfly through the grass. Thank you for saying that. They fell into comfortable silence, watching Caleb's explorations. After a moment, Brock spoke again, his voice thoughtful. I've been thinking about something, Lily, and I'd appreciate your honest opinion. Of course, she replied, curious. I'm going to need help building this cabin if I want it done before winter. Thought about hiring men from Oregon City, but… He hesitated, then continued. Out here, neighbors often help each other with big projects like this. Barn raisings, cabin building, and such. You're thinking of having a cabin raising? Lily asked, familiar with the tradition. If you think folks around here would be willing, Brock said. I'm still new, don't know many people besides you and the Harringtons. Lily considered the idea. Most of the settlers around here are good people. They understand the value of helping a neighbor, knowing that help will be returned when needed. She smiled. And they never turn down a reason for gathering and sharing food. Then would you help me organize it? Brock asked. I can provide the food and drink, but I'd value your knowledge of who to invite and how these things are properly done. The request surprised and pleased her. It was both practical and an acknowledgement of her place in the community, something that had been hard-won after Thomas died, and some questioned whether a woman alone could maintain a homestead. I'd be happy to, she replied. We could aim for 2 weeks from now when the Thompsons' planting is finished, but before the Millers start their sheep shearing. Brock's face lit up with a genuine smile that transformed his features, making him look younger and almost boyish despite his beard. That would be perfect. As they packed up to leave, Lily found herself looking at the property with new eyes, not just as Brock's land, but as a place where a community would come together to help establish a new neighbor. And perhaps, though she hardly dared admit it to herself, as a place she might visit often in the future. The 2 weeks leading up to the cabin raising flew by in a flurry of preparations. Lily rode to neighboring homesteads to extend invitations, while Brock continued preparation of the site and materials. He visited her cabin almost daily, sometimes to discuss plans for the event, sometimes bearing small gifts, fresh fish from the creek, wild strawberries he'd discovered growing on his land, or once, a small wooden horse he'd carved for Caleb. Each visit deepened the connection between them. Lily learned that Brock had left his home in Kentucky at 17 after a final, terrible argument with his father. He'd worked cattle drives across the Western Territories, saved his earnings carefully, and dreamed of land of his own. In turn, she shared stories of her journey from Missouri with Thomas, their early struggles in the territory, and her determination to provide Caleb with stability after his father's death. The day before the cabin raising, Brock arrived with his wagon loaded with supplies from Oregon City: flour, sugar, coffee, and even a crate of oranges that must have cost a small fortune. You didn't need to be so extravagant, Lily said as she helped him unload the goods into her cabin, where she would prepare much of the food for tomorrow's gathering. Want to make a good first impression, Brock replied, hefting a sack of potatoes. These people will be my neighbors for years to come, God willing. The casual reference to a future settled nearby sent a pleasant shiver through Lily. They'll be more impressed by your willingness to work alongside them than by fancy food, she assured him. Though the children will certainly appreciate those oranges. Brock set down the potatoes and turned to her, suddenly serious. "Lily, there's something I've been meaning to ask you." Her heart skipped a beat at his tone. "Yes, tomorrow, after the raising. I was hoping you and Caleb might consider staying on at the property. Just for a night or two," he added quickly, seeing her surprise. "The cabin won't have proper furnishings yet, but there's a lean-to where I've been sleeping that's comfortable enough. You could have the cabin and Caleb might enjoy camping out." "Why?" Lily asked, genuinely curious about the invitation. Brock rubbed the back of his neck, a rare gesture of uncertainty from the usually confident man. "Thought it might be nice to have a proper housewarming. And truthfully, I've grown accustomed to your company, both of you," he added. "The place feels emptier when you're not there." The simple honesty of the statement touched Lily deeply. "I'll think on it," she promised. "Let's see how tomorrow goes first." The morning of the cabin raising dawned clear and bright. Lily and Caleb were up before sunrise, loading the wagon Brock had left with them with food and bedding for the day. They arrived at the property just as the sun crested the eastern hills, casting long golden light across the meadow. Brock was already hard at work, moving logs into position according to the cabin plan. He straightened when he saw them approach, wiping his brow with his sleeve. "Good morning," he called, striding toward the wagon. "Wasn't sure you'd be this early." "Lots to prepare before everyone arrives," Lily replied, accepting his hand as she climbed down. Caleb was too excited to sleep past dawn anyway. "Is that so?" Brock grinned at the boy, who was practically vibrating with anticipation. "Well then, partner, how about you help me lay out the tools for the men while your ma sets up the food tables?" The next hour passed in comfortable industry as they prepared the site. Brock had constructed simple tables from planks and sawhorses, which Lily covered with cloths and began arranging with bread, preserves, and coffee for the workers' breakfast. Caleb trailed after Brock, solemnly carrying smaller tools and arranging them exactly as instructed. The first families began arriving just after 7, the Harringtons, followed closely by the Millers and their 4 children. By 8, more than 20 adults and a dozen children had gathered, the men congregating around the foundation Brock had prepared, the women organizing the food and setting up activities to keep the youngest children occupied. Lily watched with pride as Brock addressed the assembled workers, explaining his design and thanking them for their help. He had a natural way with people, respectful without being deferential, confident without arrogance. The men seemed to take his measure and approve, nodding at his practical suggestions and offering their own expertise where relevant. Work began in earnest after a quick breakfast. The foundation logs were already in place, and the men divided into teams to begin raising the walls. Women kept coffee flowing, minded children, and prepared the midday meal, but many also joined in the work when needed, holding logs steady, mixing mud for chinking or sorting materials. Throughout the morning, Lily found herself repeatedly catching Brock's eye across the busy site. Each time, he would offer a smile or a nod that seemed meant only for her, a private communication amid the communal activity. The shared glances made her feel like they were partners in this endeavor, though she had no formal claim to such a role. By midday, the cabin's 4 walls stood firmly in place, and the men turned their attention to the roof beams. The work was harder now, requiring strength and careful coordination as heavy logs were lifted into position. Lily held her breath more than once as Brock balanced on the top log of the wall, guiding a beam into place while men below used ropes to support its weight. "Your friend is a capable man," Ruth Harrington commented as she joined Lily in slicing ham for lunch. "Knows what he's about with that cabin." "He's had plenty of experience building," Lily replied, focusing on her task to hide the flush she felt rising to her cheeks. Ruth, a motherly woman in her 50s with kind eyes and a practical nature, smiled knowingly. "Experience is one thing. The way he organizes the work, anticipates problems before they arise, that's good judgment. Important quality in a husband." Lily nearly sliced her finger at the blunt observation. "Mr. Adams and I are just neighbors, Mrs. Harrington." "Of course," Ruth replied, her tone making it clear she believed otherwise. "And neighbors help each other. Like how he's been riding to your place almost daily this past fortnight, according to my Henry, who passes your property on his way to the mill." Before Lily could formulate a response, Caleb came running up, breathless with excitement. "Mama, Mr. Brock says I can help hammer pegs for the roof. Can I?" Lily hesitated, concerned about the height, but Brock appeared behind Caleb, his expression reassuring. "He'll stay on the ground, Lily. Just hammering the pegs I dropped down to him, with Mr. Miller supervising. Thought he might like to have a hand in building the place." The way he included Caleb in his plans, always finding appropriate ways for the boy to participate and feel important, never failed to warm Lily's heart. "All right then, but you listen to Mr. Miller exactly, understand?" "Yes, madam," Caleb promised, already dashing back toward where the roof work continued. "That boy needs a father," Ruth observed quietly after Caleb was out of earshot, "and from what I can see, he's already chosen one." The simple statement hung in the air between them as Ruth moved away to organize the lunch service. Lily stood motionless for a moment, Ruth's words echoing in her mind. Was it that obvious to everyone? And more importantly, was Ruth right about Brock's intentions? The remainder of the day passed in a blur of activity. The roof was completed by mid-afternoon, and work turned to the door, windows, and a simple stone fireplace. Women hung bundles of wildflowers from the roof beams, a tradition meant to bring good fortune to the new home, and children collected smooth stones from the creek to line the fireplace hearth. As the sun began its descent toward the western hills, the cabin stood complete in its basic form. It would need chinking between the logs and proper furnishings, but the structure itself was sound: 4 walls, a roof, a door, and 2 windows. The assembled neighbors stood back to admire their work, satisfaction evident on tired faces. "Time to celebrate," Henry Harrington announced, producing a fiddle from his wagon. "No cabin raisings complete without a proper dance to settle the floor," a cheer went up from the gathered crowd. Tables were quickly moved to create a dancing space on the packed earth in front of the new cabin. Lanterns were lit and hung from nearby trees as twilight deepened, and soon the sweet strains of Buffalo Gals filled the air. Lily found herself swept into the impromptu celebration, helping serve the desserts she'd prepared: apple and berry pies, molasses cookies, and a special cake made with precious white sugar saved for the occasion. Children danced in their own circle, more exuberance than grace, while adults formed proper lines for reels and square dances. She was so busy ensuring everyone had food and drink that she barely noticed Brock's absence until he appeared at her side, freshly washed and wearing a clean shirt. "May I have this dance, Mrs. Jenkins?" he asked formally, extending his hand as the fiddle struck up a waltz. Lily hesitated only briefly before placing her hand in his. "I'm afraid I'm not much of a dancer, Mr. Adams." "Fortunate then that I am," he replied with a smile, leading her to the improvised dance floor. His hand at her waist was gentle but firm as he guided her into the waltz. Lily had danced rarely since coming to Oregon Territory. Social gatherings were infrequent, and Thomas had never cared for such activities. She felt awkward at first, too aware of the eyes watching them, but Brock's steady lead and encouraging smile soon helped her relax into the movement. "Thank you," he said as they turned beneath the lantern light, "for today, for everything these past weeks." "I didn't do much," Lily demurred. "It was the community that raised your cabin." "You brought the community," Brock replied. "Without you, I'd be hammering those logs alone for a month or more." They danced in silence for a moment, the fiddle's melody wrapping around them like a tangible thing. Lily was acutely aware of his hand at her waist, the breadth of his shoulders beneath her fingertips, the way his eyes never left her face. "Have you thought about staying tonight?" Brock asked finally. "Caleb's already asking Mr. Harrington about fishing in the creek at dawn." Lily glanced toward where Caleb sat with the older man, their heads bent together in serious conversation. "I have," she admitted, "and I think we will if the offer still stands." The smile that spread across Brock's face was worth any impropriety others might perceive in her decision. "It stands," he assured her, "always will." As the dance ended, Lily became aware of the knowing looks exchanged among the women watching them. There would be talk, she knew, about the widow Jenkins and the new settler, about the propriety of her staying at his property. But in that moment, with Brock's hand still holding hers and Caleb's happy face visible in the lantern light, Lily found she didn't care as much as she might have expected. The gathering began to disperse shortly after, families loading tired children into wagons for the journey home. Ruth Harrington pressed a package into Lily's hands before leaving breakfast for tomorrow, she whispered with a wink. The last to leave were the Millers, who promised to return the following week to help Brock begin fencing for his planned cattle. When the final wagon disappeared down the track, a strange quiet settled over the property. Caleb, exhausted from the day's excitement, had fallen asleep on a blanket near the fire that still burned outside the cabin. Brock gently lifted him and carried him into the new structure, where Lily had already arranged bedding on the smooth plank floor. "He never stirs," Brock observed as he laid the boy down carefully. "Sleeps like a rock." "Always has," Lily replied, removing Caleb's boots and covering him with a light blanket. "Even as a baby." They stepped back outside, both suddenly awkward in the newfound privacy. The fire cast flickering light across the clearing, and somewhere in the distance, an owl called softly. "I'll sleep in the lean-to," Brock said, gesturing to the simple shelter he'd constructed against a large oak tree. "There are extra blankets if you need them for the night. It gets cool toward dawn." Lily nodded, suddenly shy. "Thank you for today, for including Caleb in the building." It meant a lot to him. "He's a good boy," Brock replied simply. "Any man would be proud to." He trailed off, seemed to reconsider his words. "Would you like coffee before turning in? I've got a pot on the fire still." "I'd like that," Lily said, grateful for the suggestion that prolonged their time together. They sat beside the fire on wooden stumps that would eventually become proper chairs, sipping coffee and looking at the cabin silhouetted against the star-filled sky. The silence between them was comfortable, filled with the night sounds of the wilderness crickets chirping, the soft babble of the creek, the occasional rustle of some small creature in the underbrush. "Hard to believe it was just logs this morning," Brock said finally. "That's the wonder of a cabin raising," Lily replied. "What would take one man weeks can be accomplished in a day when people work together." Brock nodded thoughtfully. "Makes me think about a lot of things in life that way. Burdens that seem too heavy for one person to bear become manageable when shared." He glanced at her, his expression half hidden in the firelight. "I've been alone a long time, Lily, by choice mostly. Thought it was easier that way. And now," she asked softly, "now I'm not so sure." He set his coffee cup aside and turned to face her more directly. "These past weeks, having you and Caleb in my life, it's shown me what I've been missing." Lily's heart beat faster at his words. "We've enjoyed your company too," she said carefully. "It's more than company I'm thinking of," Brock said, his voice low but clear. "I know it hasn't been long and I don't want to rush you, but I also want to be honest about my intentions." He reached across the space between them and took her hand, his calloused fingers warm against her skin. "I care for you, Lily Jenkins, for you and for your boy, and if you'd allow it, I'd like to court you properly." The directness of his declaration took her breath away. Thomas had proposed to her after a proper courtship supervised by her parents, all conducted according to the social rules they'd grown up with. But here in the Oregon Territory, conventional courtship was often a luxury that the hardships of frontier life didn't allow for. "Brock," she began, uncertain how to express the tangle of emotions his words evoked, "I care for you too, but I have Caleb to consider and my homestead." "I'm not asking for any decisions tonight," he assured her, squeezing her hand gently. "Just permission to call on you with intention, not just as a neighbor. To see if what I feel, what I hope we both feel, might grow into something lasting." The earnestness in his voice, the respectful way he acknowledged her concerns without dismissing them, confirmed what she'd already come to believe about Brock Adams, that he was a man of integrity, thoughtful and considerate in ways that went beyond simple good manners. "Yes," Lily said finally, her voice stronger than she expected. "I'd like that very much." The smile that spread across Brock's face made him look younger, almost boyish despite his beard and weathered features. Without releasing her hand, he reached into his pocket with his free one. "I have something for you," he said. "Not a ring or anything so formal yet, but a token." He pressed a small object into her palm, a wooden heart, polished smooth and warm from being carried in his pocket. Carved into its surface were their initials LJ and BA. Surrounded by a simple pattern of leaves. "I made it while waiting for today," he explained, a hint of uncertainty in his voice. Thought about giving it to you earlier but wasn't sure if it would be welcome. Lily traced her fingers over the carving, touched beyond words by the simple gift and all it represented. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "Thank you." Their eyes met in the firelight, and Lily felt the world narrow to just this moment, this man. When Brock leaned forward slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, she found herself meeting him halfway. His lips were gentle against hers, the kiss tender and questioning rather than demanding. His beard tickled slightly against her skin, but the sensation was not unpleasant. When he drew back after a moment, his eyes searched hers, looking for reassurance that he hadn't overstepped. Lily smiled, holding the wooden heart close to her chest. "It's getting late," she said softly, "and tomorrow we'll come early with Caleb's fishing plans." Brock nodded, understanding her gentle withdrawal without offense. "Sleep well, Lily," he said, rising to his feet and offering his hand to help her up. "I'll see you at sunrise." As Lily settled beside Caleb on the blankets inside the newly raised cabin, the wooden heart clutched in her hand. She felt a sense of possibility that had been absent from her life for longer than she cared to admit. The cabin smelled of fresh cut wood and the wildflowers still hanging from the beams, and through the unshuttered window, she could see stars scattered across the velvet sky. Somewhere outside, Brock was settling into his lean-to, just a few yards away yet respectfully distant. Tomorrow would bring new conversations, new understandings between them. But for tonight, the promise of what might be was enough to send Lily into the most peaceful sleep she'd had in years. Spring melted into summer, and Brock's courtship of Lily progressed with the changing seasons. True to his word, he called on her regularly, sometimes bringing small gifts, sometimes simply offering his help with chores around her homestead. Caleb flourished under his attention, soaking up the man's knowledge of horses, cattle, and wilderness survival like a sponge. By July, Brock's cabin had become a proper home, with furniture he'd either made himself or traded for with neighbors. His small herd of cattle grazed contentedly in the meadows, and he'd added chickens and 2 milk cows to his growing farm. Lily and Caleb visited at least twice a week, and Brock made the journey to their homestead on Sundays after church, joining them for dinner even though he still politely declined to attend the services. The community had accepted their courtship with a mixture of approval and the inevitable gossip that accompanied any romance in a small settlement. Most, like Ruth Harrington, simply seemed pleased to see the young widow finding happiness again, while appreciating that Brock conducted himself with appropriate respect for Lily's reputation. On a warm August evening, Lily sat on her porch watching Brock teach Caleb how to whittle a simple whistle from a willow branch. The boy's tongue poked out in concentration as he tried to imitate Brock's careful knife strokes, his small hands awkward but determined. "Careful with the blade, partner," Brock cautioned. "Always cut away from yourself, remember?" "I remember," Caleb replied solemnly, "like you showed me with the fishing knife." Lily marveled at the change in her son over the past months. He had always been a happy child, but there was a new confidence in him now, a security that came from having a man's steady influence in his life. Brock never tried to replace Thomas in Caleb's memory. In fact, he occasionally asked the boy to share stories about his father, ensuring Thomas remained a respected presence in Caleb's life. "Look, Mama," Caleb exclaimed, holding up the rough whistle. "Mr. Brock says it'll make noise once we hollow it out." "It's wonderful, sweetheart," Lily replied, smiling at his enthusiasm. "Just please don't blow it in the house when it's finished." "Yes, madam," Caleb agreed, then turned back to Brock. "Can we finish it now, please?" Brock glanced at the setting sun. "It's getting late, partner. How about we save the rest for tomorrow? I need to speak with your mama anyway." Caleb looked disappointed but didn't argue. "Promise we'll finish it first thing," Brock confirmed solemnly. "Now, why don't you check on those chickens before it gets dark? Make sure they're all settled in the coop for the night." Once Caleb had dashed off to complete his assigned task, Brock joined Lily on the porch steps, his larger frame making the wooden step creak slightly as he sat beside her. "He's doing well with the whittling," Lily observed. "You're a good teacher." "He's a quick learner," Brock replied, his eyes following Caleb's movement around the chicken coop. "Smart boy." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the sunset paint the distant hills in shades of gold and purple. Lily was acutely aware of Brock's presence beside her, the clean scent of soap and leather that always seemed to surround him, the way his shoulder almost but didn't quite touch hers. "Lily," Brock began, his voice unusually hesitant, "I've been thinking about something important." She turned to face him, noting the serious set of his features. "What is it?" Brock took a deep breath. "Winter will be here before we know it. I've got the cabin weatherproofed now and the root cellars nearly finished. Been thinking it might be." He paused, seemed to gather his resolve, and continued. "It might be time to make things official between us." Though they had grown closer over the summer months, sharing increasingly tender moments and deepening their understanding of each other, they had not spoken explicitly of marriage. Lily had been content to let their relationship develop naturally, appreciating Brock's patience and restraint. "Are you asking what I think you're asking, Brock Adams?" she said softly. He smiled, some of the tension leaving his shoulders. "I'm trying to, though not very gracefully." He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small leather pouch. "I made a trip to Oregon City last week, had something made for you." From the pouch, he produced a ring, a simple gold band with a small pearl set into its center, catching the last rays of sunset in a warm glow. "It's not fancy," Brock said apologetically, "but the jeweler said pearls represent tears of joy, and I hope—" He cleared his throat. "I hope that's what our life together would bring you, joy, I mean, not tears." Lily felt her own eyes filling with the very tears he'd just mentioned as he continued, his voice growing stronger with each word. "I love you, Lily Jenkins. I love Caleb too, and I want to be a father to him in every way that matters. I can't promise life will always be easy, this territory's still wild, and farming's never certain. But I can promise to work hard every day to provide for you both, to protect you, and to show you both the respect and love you deserve." He held the ring between them, a question in his eyes. "Will you marry me, Lily? Will you and Caleb make a family with me?" The answer had been forming in Lily's heart for months, though she hadn't allowed herself to fully acknowledge it until this moment. "Yes," she whispered, then louder, "Yes, Brock, we will." His smile was like sunrise breaking over the mountains as he slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, the pearl gleaming against her skin. "When?" he asked, taking her hands in his. "Before winter," Lily decided. "There's no reason to wait, is there?" "Perhaps late September, when the harvest is in." "September it is," Brock agreed, leaning forward to seal their engagement with a kiss. They were interrupted by a whoop of joy as Caleb, having finished his chicken duties, caught sight of them from the yard. He raced toward the porch, launching himself at them both. "Are you going to be my pa now?" he demanded, looking between them with bright eyes. Brock looked to Lily, letting her take the lead in this crucial conversation. "Mr. Brock has asked me to marry him," she explained to her son. "And I've said yes. That means he would become your stepfather. How do you feel about that?" Caleb considered this for approximately 2 seconds before breaking into a wide grin. "Does that mean we'll live in his cabin, with the creek and the fort and everything?" "It does," Brock confirmed. "Though we'd need to make some changes, add a proper room for you, for one thing. And can I help with the cattle and learn to ride the big horse?" Caleb pressed, practically vibrating with excitement. "When you're a bit older," Lily cautioned, though she couldn't help smiling at his enthusiasm. "This is the best day ever," Caleb declared, throwing his arms around Brock's neck. "I've been wishing and wishing for this." Over the boy's head, Lily's eyes met Brock's, and she saw in them the same emotion that filled her own heart: gratitude, joy, and a love that had grown from the most unexpected of beginnings. Word of their engagement spread quickly through the community, with Ruth Harrington taking particular pride in having predicted the match from the start. Preparations for a September wedding began in earnest, with neighbors offering help in every form, from Ruth's promise to bake the wedding cake to Henry Harrington's offer to expand Brock's cabin to better accommodate a family. The women of the community gathered at Lily's homestead one August afternoon for a quilting bee, ostensibly to create a wedding gift, but primarily to share in the excitement of upcoming nuptials, a relatively rare event in their frontier community. "Have you thought about what to do with your property after you're married?" Ruth asked as they worked on the colorful wedding quilt. "Will you sell it?" Lily had indeed been considering this question. The homestead represented security land of her own that couldn't be taken from her regardless of what happened in her marriage. But maintaining two properties made little practical sense, especially with Brock's land being more developed and better situated. "We've discussed renting it," Lily replied. "Brock knows a family newly arrived from Pennsylvania who need a place to start. They can't afford to buy outright yet, but they're hardworking folks." "Sensible arrangement," Ruth nodded approvingly. "Gives you income but keeps the property in your name." The other women nodded in agreement. On the frontier, practical matters of property and security were discussed openly among women, who understood better than most the precarious position a woman without resources could find herself in. "Brock suggested it, actually," Lily added, unable to keep a note of pride from her voice. "Said he wanted me to always have something that's mine alone, just in case." "Just in case," young Mrs. Miller repeated, looking confused. "In case of widowhood, dear," Ruth explained matter-of-factly. "A wise precaution in these parts, though I doubt you'll need it. Your Mr. Adams seems hale and hearty enough." Lily smiled at the older woman's blunt assessment. "It's not just that. He understands that having something of my own matters to me. After Thomas died, knowing I had this place kept me going on the hardest days." The conversation shifted to wedding preparations, and Lily let herself be carried along by the excited chatter about food, decorations, and what she would wear. But her thoughts kept returning to Brock's thoughtfulness in encouraging her to keep her homestead. It was one of the many ways he showed his respect for her independence, a quality she had come to value deeply after the challenges of widowhood. Meanwhile, Brock and several of the neighboring men were hard at work expanding his cabin. A new room was being added for Caleb, and the main living area enlarged to better accommodate family life. Brock had insisted on building proper furniture as well, a larger bed for himself and Lily, a chest of drawers for her things, and shelves for books and household items. Caleb divided his time between helping with men's work at the new cabin and assisting Lily in packing their belongings for the eventual move. He approached both tasks with infectious enthusiasm, constantly chattering about life in their new home and all the adventures he would have with Pa Brock, as he had taken to calling his soon-to-be stepfather. "Can I bring my fort?" he asked one evening as Lily sorted through his few toys and treasures. "Your fort is made of branches and blankets, sweetheart," Lily reminded him gently. "But I'm sure you can build an even better one on Mr. Brock's on our new land." "Pa Brock says there's a perfect spot behind the big oak tree," Caleb informed her seriously. "And he says we can make it stronger with real walls." Lily smiled at her son's excitement. "That sounds wonderful. What else have you and Mr. Brock been planning?" Caleb's face lit up at the question. "He's going to teach me to fish properly with a real rod instead of just a string, and next spring he says I can have my own garden patch to grow whatever I want. And..." He lowered his voice to a conspiratorial whisper. "He says maybe next year I can have a puppy of my very own." "Does he now?" Lily raised an eyebrow, making a mental note to discuss this particular promise with her fiancé. "Well, that's something to look forward to, isn't it?" As September approached, Lily found herself increasingly dividing her time between two homes, the familiar comfort of her homestead and the exciting promise of the expanded cabin on Brock's land. Each place represented a different chapter of her life, and while she occasionally felt a pang of nostalgia when looking around the cabin she had shared with Thomas, she found her heart pulling more strongly toward the future Brock was building for them. 2 weeks before the wedding, Lily arrived at Brock's property to find him sitting on the porch steps, an unusually serious expression on his face. Caleb had stayed behind with Ruth for the day, giving Lily and Brock rare time alone. "What's wrong?" she asked immediately, recognizing the tension in his shoulders. Brock stood as she approached, taking her hands in his. "Nothing's wrong exactly, but there's something I need to tell you, something I should have mentioned before." He led her to the porch bench he'd recently completed. "It's about my past." Lily felt a flutter of anxiety but kept her expression calm. "I'm listening." Brock took a deep breath. "You know I left Kentucky after a falling out with my father. What I haven't told you is why." He looked down at their joined hands, then back to her face. "My father wanted me to join the Confederate cause. He was a slave owner, Lily, with a cotton plantation worked by people he considered property. We fought bitterly about it. I couldn't stomach the institution, couldn't bear to fight for the right to own human beings." He paused, gauging her reaction. Lily squeezed his hands encouragingly, and he continued. The night I left, I didn't just leave, I helped 3 of his slaves escape north. He caught us, there was a struggle, and Brock's voice faltered. I struck him. Hard enough that he fell and didn't get up right away. I don't know if he was badly hurt, I didn't stay to find out. I took the people I'd promised to help and we fled. I got them to a station on the Underground Railroad, then kept moving west, afraid he'd send men after me. How old were you? Lily asked softly. 17, Brock replied. Young enough to be terrified, old enough to know my own mind about what was right. Lily considered his words carefully. The issue of slavery had divided the nation violently, with the Civil War tearing families apart just a few years ago. While Oregon had entered the Union as a free state, opinions about slavery and race varied widely among settlers. Thank you for telling me, she said finally. It can't have been easy to carry that alone all these years. You're not troubled by it, Brock asked hesitantly. Troubled that you stood against slavery, that you helped people escape to freedom, Lily shook her head firmly. My father taught me that all people are equal in God's eyes, whatever their color. I'm proud that you had the courage to act on your conscience even at such a young age. Relief washed over Brock's features. I wanted you to know everything about me before we married. I don't know if my father is still alive or if there might be legal consequences for what I did. I don't think anyone could trace me here after all this time, but I wouldn't want to bring trouble to your door unaware. Lily reached up to touch his face, her fingers gentle against his beard. Your past is part of who you are, Brock. And who you are is the man I love, a man of principle and courage. He turned his face to kiss her palm, his eyes never leaving hers. I don't deserve you, Lily Jenkins. Well, you're getting me anyway, she replied with a smile, and Caleb too, we're a package deal, remember? The best package a man could ask for, Brock said, drawing her into his arms. As they sat together on the porch of what would soon be their shared home, watching the afternoon sun filter through the oak leaves, Lily felt a deep certainty that the path ahead, whatever challenges it might hold, was the right one for her and for Caleb. The day of the wedding dawned clear and bright, with just enough crispness in the air to hint at the autumn to come. The ceremony was to be held outdoors, in the meadow between Brock's cabin and the creek that had once nearly claimed Caleb's life, but had instead brought Brock into theirs. Lily stood in the bedroom of her homestead, allowing Ruth Harrington to help her with the buttons of her wedding dress, a dove gray silk that had been ordered from Portland at considerable expense. It was simpler than the elaborate white gowns fashionable back east, but its clean lines suited Lily's practical nature while still marking the occasion as special. You look beautiful, Ruth declared, adjusting the single strand of pearls that had been her own wedding gift to Lily. Absolutely radiant. Lily studied her reflection in the small mirror, hardly recognizing the woman who looked back at her. She had always considered herself ordinary: brown hair, brown eyes, features that were pleasant enough but not remarkable. But today, with happiness lighting her from within, she looked transformed. Do you think he'll be pleased? She asked, a rare moment of self-doubt surfacing. Ruth chuckled. That man looks at you like you hang the moon and stars, Lily Jenkins. He'll be speechless. A knock at the door announced Caleb, dressed in his Sunday best and practically vibrating with excitement. The wagon's here, Mama. Mr. Henry says it's time to go. Well then, Lily said, taking a deep breath, I suppose we shouldn't keep everyone waiting. The journey to Brock's land, soon to be their land, passed in a blur of anticipation. Henry Harrington had decorated his wagon with ribbons and wildflowers for the occasion, and Caleb chattered nonstop about the cake Mrs. Miller had been seen delivering earlier that morning. As they approached the property, Lily could see the gathering that awaited them. Nearly everyone from the surrounding homesteads had come, dressed in their finest clothes. Tables had been set up beneath the oak trees, laden with food contributed by every family. Children darted between adults, excited by the festive atmosphere, and there, standing tall and straight beneath an arch of autumn flowers, was Brock. He wore a new black suit that must have cost a small fortune, his dark beard neatly trimmed and his hair slicked back. But it was his expression, as he caught sight of the approaching wagon, that Lily would remember forever, a look of such pure joy and wonder that it brought tears to her eyes. Henry helped her down from the wagon with old-fashioned courtesy, and Caleb immediately took her hand, appointed himself her escort for the short walk to where Brock and Reverend Thompson waited. As they approached, the assembled neighbors fell silent, creating an aisle through which Lily walked with her son at her side. Brock stepped forward to meet them halfway, kneeling first to Caleb's level. "Thank you for bringing your mama to me, partner," he said solemnly. "You've done a fine job taking care of her." Caleb beamed with pride, then leaned forward to whisper something in Brock's ear that made the man's eyes widen slightly before he nodded. With a grin, Caleb placed Lily's hand in Brock's and stepped to the side where Ruth waited for him. "You're a vision," Brock whispered as he straightened, holding Lily's hand as if it were made of the finest porcelain. "So are you," she replied softly, taking in the sight of him in his formal attire. Together they walked the remaining distance to where Reverend Thompson waited, his Bible open and a smile on his weathered face. The ceremony itself was simple, but heartfelt traditional vows spoken with clear voices that carried across the meadow, promises of love and fidelity exchanged along with the rings they would wear for the rest of their lives. When the Reverend pronounced them husband and wife, Brock's kiss was gentle but held a promise of passion that brought color to Lily's cheeks. The assembled neighbors erupted in cheers and applause, none louder than Caleb, who raced forward to throw his arms around them both. "We're a real family now," he exclaimed, his face alight with joy. Brock lifted the boy into his arms with ease. "That we are, partner, that we are." The celebration that followed lasted well into the evening. There was music from Henry's fiddle and Mr. Miller's harmonica, dancing on the grass, and more food than Lily had seen in one place since leaving Missouri. Children played games under the watchful eyes of the older women, and men gathered to discuss crops and cattle while enjoying the special whiskey Brock had procured for the occasion. As twilight descended, lanterns were lit around the clearing, casting a warm glow over the festivities. Lily found herself seated beside her new husband, watching Caleb play a game of tag with the other children, his laughter carrying across the gathering. "Happy, Mrs. Adams?" Brock asked, his arm draped comfortably across her shoulders. "Very," Lily replied, leaning into his embrace. "Though I'm still getting used to the name." "It suits you," he said, pressing a kiss to her temple. "Almost as well as you suit me." Later, after the guests had departed and Caleb had been tucked into his new bed in the room built especially for him, Lily stood in the main room of what was now truly her home. Brock moved around the cabin, extinguishing lamps until only the fire in the hearth illuminated the space. "Come here, wife," he said softly, extending his hand to her. Lily went to him without hesitation, her earlier nervousness about their first night together having faded throughout the day. This was her Brock, and the love and respect between them had built a foundation of trust that overshadowed any uncertainty. When he took her in his arms, his kiss was different from any they had shared before, deeper, more urgent, yet still tender in a way that made her heart ache with fullness. His hands, those capable hands that had built their home and saved her son, now moved with gentle reverence over her body, awakening sensations Lily had forgotten she could feel. "I love you," he whispered against her skin as he guided her toward their bed. "I'll spend the rest of my life showing you just how much." In the warm glow of the firelight, they came together as husband and wife, their union a culmination of a journey that had begun with a near tragedy and transformed into the greatest blessing of their lives. Winter came early that year, with the first snow falling in late October. The Adams family was well prepared, the root cellar stocked with vegetables from their garden, meat smoked and preserved, and enough firewood stacked to last through even the coldest months. The cabin, with Brock's careful weatherproofing and the new additions, remained warm and snug against the howling winds that sometimes swept down from the mountains. Lily discovered unexpected joy in the rhythm of their shared life. Mornings began with Brock rising early to tend the animals, often taking Caleb with him for what the boy proudly called their man chores. By the time they returned, rosy-cheeked and stamping snow from their boots, Lily would have breakfast waiting hearty porridge or biscuits with gravy and always strong coffee for Brock. The days passed in comfortable industry. While the heavy outdoor work slowed during winter, there was still plenty to occupy them. Brock worked on crafting furniture and tools in the small workshop he'd built adjoining the barn, while Lily tended to household tasks and began teaching Caleb his letters and numbers more formally than she had before. In the evenings, they gathered around the fire. Brock proved to have a talent for storytelling, entertaining Caleb with tales of his travels across the Western Territories, carefully edited to be appropriate for young ears. Sometimes he read aloud from one of the few books they owned, his deep voice bringing the stories to life in a way that entranced both Lily and Caleb. It was during one such evening in early December, with snow falling gently outside and a venison stew bubbling on the stove, that Lily realized she was happier than she had ever been. Caleb sat on the floor at Brock's feet, working on a wooden puzzle his stepfather had made for him, while Brock mended a harness strap, his strong hands working the leather with practiced ease. The simple domesticity of the scene brought tears to Lily's eyes, happy tears that she quickly blinked away when Brock glanced up and caught her watching them. "Everything all right?" he asked softly. "Perfect," she replied, meaning it completely. Later that night, after Caleb was asleep, Lily curled against Brock's side in their bed, her head resting on his chest where she could hear the steady beating of his heart. "I have something to tell you," she whispered, suddenly feeling shy. Brock's arm tightened around her. "What is it, love?" Lily took his free hand and guided it to rest on her stomach. "We're going to have a baby, come summer." She felt rather than saw his reaction, the catch in his breath, the momentary tensing of his body, and then the trembling of his hand against her still flat abdomen. "A baby." He repeated, his voice thick with emotion. "You're certain?" "As certain as I can be," Lily confirmed. "Ruth confirmed my suspicions when she visited last week." In one fluid movement, Brock shifted so that he could look at her face in the dim light from the banked fire. What Lily saw in his eyes made her heart swell, wonder, joy, and a fierce protectiveness that left no doubt about his feelings. "A baby," he said again, a smile spreading across his face. "Our baby." He leaned down to kiss her, then moved to press his lips gently against her stomach. "Hello in there, little one," he whispered. "Your ma and I are mighty pleased to meet you." Lily laughed softly, running her fingers through his hair. "The baby can't hear you yet, Brock." "Doesn't matter," he replied, looking up at her with such love that it took her breath away. "I want to start as I mean to go on, letting this child know every day how wanted and loved they are." They lay together in the darkness, making plans and sharing dreams for their growing family. Brock was determined to build a cradle right away and to add another room to the cabin come spring. Lily spoke of quilts to sew and tiny clothes to make, her practical nature already preparing for the baby's arrival months ahead. "Should we tell Caleb?" Brock asked eventually. "Or wait a while?" Lily considered the question. "Let's wait until after Christmas. Give him time to enjoy the holiday without sharing attention with the idea of a new baby." "Good thinking," Brock agreed. "Besides, it gives us something special just for us for a little while." As winter deepened, so did the bonds of their family. Caleb blossomed under Brock's guidance, learning to whittle simple shapes, help with the livestock, and even beginning to read with Lily's daily lessons. He had taken completely to calling Brock Pa, and the two had developed their own rituals and private jokes that sometimes left Lily smiling in fond confusion. Christmas arrived with a week of clear, cold days that turned the landscape into a glistening wonderland. Brock surprised Lily by disappearing one morning and returning with a small pine tree, which they decorated with paper chains, dried berries, and the few ornaments Lily had brought from Missouri years ago. Caleb's excitement was contagious as he helped prepare special treats, gingerbread cookies cut into star shapes, popcorn strung on thread, and cranberry sauce made from berries Brock had traded for in Oregon City. His faith in Santa Claus remained unshaken, despite the practical difficulties of imagining how the mythical figure might reach their isolated cabin. On Christmas Eve, after Caleb had finally fallen asleep, Brock and Lily placed their gifts for him beneath the tree: a new pair of boots Brock had ordered months ago, a slate and chalks for his lessons, and most exciting of all, a small wooden rocking horse that Brock had crafted in secret during the early winter evenings. "He's going to be beside himself," Lily predicted, admiring the horse's careful craftsmanship. "It's beautiful, Brock." "He deserves it," Brock replied, putting an arm around her waist, Been a big year of changes for him. He's handled it all like a champion. He adores you, Lily said softly. Sometimes I think he's forgotten he ever had another father. A shadow crossed Brock's face. I don't want him to forget Thomas. He was his father first. I know, Lily assured him, touched by his generosity of spirit. And we won't let him forget. But you're the father he'll remember, Brock, the one who taught him to fish and whittle, who listens to his stories and answers his endless questions. That's a gift beyond measure. Brock kissed her gently. Speaking of gifts, he said, reaching into his pocket, this is for you. Not much, I'm afraid. He placed a small package wrapped in brown paper in her hands. Lily unwrapped it carefully to reveal a locket silver in the shape of a heart with a delicate pattern etched into its surface. Open it, Brock urged. Inside, she found a tiny lock of Caleb's hair on one side. The other side was empty, I thought, Brock explained, that when the baby comes, we could put a lock of their hair there too. Keep both our children close to your heart. Tears filled Lily's eyes at the thoughtfulness of the gift. It's perfect, she whispered, throwing her arms around his neck. Absolutely perfect. I have something for you too, she said when she had composed herself. She retrieved a package from where she'd hidden it beneath their bed, larger than his gift to her, wrapped in cloth and tied with a ribbon. Brock opened it to find a quilt, not the utilitarian blankets they used every day, but a masterpiece of tiny, careful stitches, creating a pattern of stars against a dark blue background. Each star was made from scraps of meaningful fabrics, a piece of the shirt he'd worn the day he saved Caleb, a bit of Caleb's baby blanket, material from Lily's wedding dress, and many others. I've been working on it at Ruth's when you thought I was just visiting, Lily explained. Each star represents something important in our story. Brock ran his fingers over the intricate stitching, clearly moved by the hours of work and thought that had gone into the gift. It's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen, Lily, thank you. They hung the quilt on the wall beside their bed, the stars catching the firelight as they settled in for the night, anticipating Caleb's excitement in the morning. Christmas Day dawned bright and cold, with Caleb waking them at first light, unable to contain himself any longer. His joy at the gifts beneath the tree was everything they had hoped for, his exclamations of delight filling the cabin as he discovered each treasure. The rocking horse was the clear favorite, and he spent much of the morning galloping imaginary miles across the frontier, pausing only for the special breakfast of pancakes with maple syrup that Lily had prepared. Later, while Caleb was occupied with his new treasures, Lily and Brock exchanged a look of silent agreement. It was time to share their other news. Caleb, Lily called, patting the space beside her on the sofa. Pa and I have something to tell you, something important. The boy looked up from his play, immediately alert to the serious tone in his mother's voice. He approached cautiously, climbing up between them on the sofa. What is it? He asked, looking from one to the other. Is it bad? No, partner, not bad at all, Brock assured him, ruffling his hair. In fact, we think it's pretty wonderful news. You're going to have a little brother or sister, Lily said gently. There's a baby growing in my tummy, and when summer comes, our family will have one more person in it. Caleb's eyes widened as he processed this information. A real baby. Like the miller's little girl, that's right, Brock nodded, though we don't know yet if it will be a boy or a girl. Caleb was quiet for a long moment, his young face serious with thought. Finally, he placed a small hand on Lily's stomach. Is it very little still? Yes, very little, Lily confirmed. About the size of a walnut right now. Will I still be your boy when the baby comes? He asked, a hint of worry creeping into his voice. Always, Lily promised, pulling him close. Nothing could ever change how much we love you, Caleb. And you'll be a big brother, Brock added. That's a very important job. The baby will need you to help teach them all sorts of things, how to build forts, where the best fishing spots are, all the things you know. This idea seemed to appeal to Caleb, and his expression brightened. I could show them my rocking horse too, when they're big enough. That's right, Lily agreed, relief washing over her at his acceptance. You'll be the best big brother any baby could wish for. The remainder of the winter passed in a haze of contentment for the Adams family. News of Lily's pregnancy spread through the community, bringing visits from neighbors bearing gifts and advice. Ruth Harrington became a particular support, sharing her wisdom from raising 5 children of her own and checking regularly on Lily's health. As February turned to March, The first signs of spring began to appear: crocuses pushing through the melting snow, longer days, and the return of birdsong to the trees around their property. Brock turned his attention to preparations for spring planting and the expansion of their cabin to accommodate the coming addition to their family. Lily's body changed gradually, the subtle rounding of her abdomen becoming more pronounced as the baby grew within her. Brock watched these changes with a mixture of wonder and reverence, often placing his hand on her stomach in the evenings to feel the first fluttering movements of their child. Caleb's initial excitement about the baby had evolved into practical preparations. He helped Brock with the new room, solemnly holding nails or passing tools as requested. In quieter moments, he would sit beside Lily, telling elaborate stories to her belly about all the adventures he and the baby would have together. "Pa says the baby can hear me now," he explained seriously when Lily asked about this new habit. "I want it to know my voice so it won't be scared when it comes out." By April, the new room was complete, a small but sturdy addition adjoining Lily and Brock's bedroom, with a window that caught the morning light and shelves built into the walls for baby supplies. Brock had crafted a beautiful cradle from oak, its smooth curves and gentle rocking mechanism demonstrating both his skill and the love that went into its creation. One warm evening in late May, with the scent of wildflowers drifting through the open windows, Lily sat on the porch swing Brock had built the previous autumn. Her hands rested on her now prominent belly, feeling the increasingly vigorous movements of the child within. Brock joined her after finishing the evening chores, Caleb having already been tucked into bed with a new story about mountain men that had quickly lulled him to sleep. "How are you feeling?" Brock asked, settling beside her and placing a gentle hand alongside hers on her stomach. "Tired," Lily admitted, "but good. The baby's been active today." As if in response, there was a pronounced kick against Brock's palm, making him chuckle. "Strong little thing, isn't it? Gets that from its mama," Lily smiled, leaning her head against his shoulder. "I've been thinking about names." "Do you have any preferences?" Brock was quiet for a moment, his thumb making small circles on her belly. "If it's a girl," he said finally, "I've always been fond of the name Grace. Seems fitting, a grace given to us when we weren't looking for it." "Grace Adams," Lily tested the name, finding she liked the sound of it. "And if it's a boy, I thought perhaps Thomas," Brock suggested quietly. "To honor Caleb's father and the man who brought you to Oregon so that I could find you." The suggestion brought tears to Lily's eyes, another example of Brock's remarkable capacity for generosity and his understanding of what family truly meant. "Thomas Brock Adams," she said softly. "I think that would be perfect." They sat in comfortable silence as twilight deepened around them, the first stars appearing in the darkening sky. From the creek came the occasional splash of fish jumping, and somewhere in the distance, an owl called to its mate. "Are you happy, Lily?" Brock asked suddenly, his voice low and serious. "Truly happy with this life we're building?" Lily turned to look at him, surprised by the question. "More than I ever thought possible," she answered honestly. "Why do you ask?" Brock's expression was contemplative in the fading light. "Sometimes I can hardly believe how fortunate I am. That day when I found Caleb in the creek, I was just passing through, had no intention of stopping anywhere near here. If I'd been a few minutes earlier or later, if I'd taken a different trail." "But you didn't," Lily said, placing her hand over his. "You were exactly where you needed to be, exactly when we needed you." "Providence," Brock murmured. "Ruth would say it was God's plan." "And what do you say?" Lily asked. Brock considered the question, his eyes moving from her face to the stars overhead. "I say that whatever force brought me to that creek at that moment gave me more than I ever deserved. A chance to save a life, yes, but also a chance to find my own salvation in you and Caleb." The simple sincerity of his words touched Lily deeply. She leaned forward to kiss him, pouring into the gesture all the love and gratitude she felt for this man who had transformed her life. "We saved each other," she whispered against his lips. "And now we get to build something beautiful together." As the summer heat settled over the valley, Lily's time grew near. The garden flourished under Brock and Caleb's care, the cattle grew fat on the abundant grass, and preparations for the baby's arrival reached their final stages. Clean linens were stacked in the new room. Tiny clothes Lily had sewn lay folded in a chest, and a special basket of medical supplies recommended by Ruth stood ready. July brought sweltering days that made Lily increasingly uncomfortable in her advanced state. Brock insisted she rest during the hottest part of the day, taking over many of her usual tasks despite his own heavy workload. Caleb proved an enthusiastic helper, proudly reporting to Lily how he had gathered eggs or helped prepare simple meals when she was resting. It was during one such rest period, with Lily dozing in the relative cool of their bedroom, that the first pains began subtle tightenings that she initially dismissed as the practice contractions she'd been experiencing for weeks. But as the afternoon wore on, the pains grew more regular and intense, and by the time Brock returned from checking the cattle in the north pasture, Lily knew their baby was on its way. "It's time," she told him calmly as he entered the cabin. "You should send Caleb to the Harringtons and fetch Ruth." Brock's calm exterior barely masked his anxiety as he quickly organized both tasks, explaining to Caleb in simple terms that the baby was coming and he would stay with the Harringtons until it arrived. The boy seemed torn between excitement about the baby and concern for his mother, but eventually went willingly with Brock after extracting a promise that he would be brought home as soon as the baby arrived. Ruth arrived just as twilight was falling, her experienced eyes quickly assessing Lily's condition. "First babies often take their time," she assured Brock, who was pacing the main room like a caged mountain lion. "There's nothing to do now but wait." And wait they did, through the long hours of the night as Lily's labor progressed slowly but steadily. Brock remained by her side, wiping her brow with cool cloths, supporting her through the increasingly powerful contractions, and murmuring words of encouragement when her strength seemed to flag. "You're the strongest woman I know," he told her during a brief respite between pains. "You can do this, Lily. Our baby is counting on you." As dawn broke, painting the sky outside their window in shades of pink and gold, Ruth announced that the time had come for Lily to push. The next hour was a blur of intense effort, pain unlike anything Lily had experienced before, and Brock's steady presence anchoring her through it all. And then, as the first full rays of morning sunlight streamed through the window, a new sound filled the cabin, the indignant wail of a newborn taking its first breath. "A girl," Ruth announced triumphantly, quickly wiping the tiny red face and wrapping the baby in a clean cloth. "A beautiful, healthy girl." She placed the squalling infant on Lily's chest, where the baby's cries immediately quieted as she seemed to recognize her mother's warmth and heartbeat. Lily stared down in wonder at the perfect little face, the bow-shaped mouth, the tiny button nose, the wisps of dark hair that already showed a tendency to curl. "Grace," she whispered, tracing a gentle finger along the baby's cheek. "Hello, Grace Adams." Brock leaned close, his face a study in awe and adoration as he took in the sight of his daughter. A tear tracked unashamedly down his cheek and into his beard as he reached out to touch the tiny hand that had escaped the swaddling. "She's perfect," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Just like her mother." As Ruth bustled around, completing the necessary tasks of childbirth, Brock and Lily remained in their own world, marveling at the miracle they had created together. When Grace wrapped her impossibly small fingers around Brock's calloused index finger, his face crumpled with emotion. "Thank you," he whispered to Lily, pressing his forehead against hers. "For her, for everything." Once Lily had been cleaned up and settled comfortably in their bed with baby Grace nursing contentedly at her breast, Brock rode to the Harringtons to fetch Caleb. The boy returned bursting with excitement, barely able to contain himself as Brock instructed him to be gentle and quiet around his new sister. "She's so tiny," Caleb whispered, peering at the sleeping infant in Lily's arms. "Smaller than my wooden horse. But she'll grow," Lily assured him. "And before you know it, she'll be running around after you, wanting to play." Caleb considered this, his head tilted thoughtfully. "I'll teach her everything," he decided. Just like Pa promised, the first weeks with Grace were a whirlwind of adjustment for the Adams family. The baby proved to have a healthy set of lungs and definite opinions about when she should be fed and held, keeping Lily and Brock awake for much of the night. But even in their exhaustion, they found joy in each small milestone: Grace's first real smile, the way she tracked movement with increasingly alert eyes, the strength developing in her tiny limbs. Caleb adapted to his role as big brother with surprising maturity, proudly helping with small tasks like fetching clean cloths or entertaining Grace with simple songs when she was fussy. He spoke to her constantly, as he had when she was still in Lily's womb, telling her stories and describing all the adventures they would have when she was older. By harvest time, life had settled into a new rhythm. Grace had begun sleeping for longer stretches, allowing Lily to resume more of her regular duties. The garden yielded bountifully, the root cellar was stocked for winter, and Brock's cattle had increased in number with the spring, calves now growing strong. On a golden September afternoon, exactly 1 year after their wedding, the Adams family gathered on their porch to watch the sunset. Brock sat with Grace cradled in one arm, her dark curls so like his own catching the fading light. Caleb leaned against Lily's side, proudly showing her a drawing he had made of their family stick figures of varying heights, with the smallest one clearly representing Grace. "Look, Mama," he pointed to his artwork. "That's all of us, and I made our house in the creek where Pa saved me." Lily studied the childish drawing, recognizing the significance of that winding blue line. "It's wonderful, Caleb. We should frame it and hang it inside. The creek's where our story started," Brock observed, gently rocking Grace as she began to fuss. "Seems right to remember it." Lily reached across to touch his arm, her fingers lingering on the strong wrist that had once pulled her son from churning waters. "From near tragedy to all of this," she said softly. "Who could have imagined?" Brock's free hand captured hers, bringing it to his lips for a gentle kiss. "I thank God every day or whatever power might be listening that I was riding by that creek at exactly the right moment." "Me too," Caleb chimed in, "because now I have a pa and a sister and everything's perfect." As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the land that had become their home, Lily Adams looked at the family surrounding her, the husband who had appeared like an answer to prayers she hadn't even formed, the son who had survived against the odds, and the daughter who represented their shared future. From the darkest moment of her life had come everything bright and beautiful, a reminder that even in the wild and sometimes harsh territory they called home, love could take root and flourish in the most unexpected circumstances. "Yes," she agreed, leaning against Brock's shoulder as the first stars began to appear in the twilight sky. "Everything's perfect."